everybody. Welcome back to The Vegan View. Today we have the Chickpeeps, two of the Chickpeeps. We have Evanna Lynch and Momoko. Welcome, guys. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. What a nice little space you've created.
We are big fans of your podcast. I can't remember when I first discovered it. I think one of our subscribers suggested it, and I listened to one of your episodes and I was like, oh my gosh, these girls and guys, they align so much with what we believe about veganism, about the approach to veganism, just approaching things with kindness, staying true to who you are. And so we love what you guys are doing and are so excited to have you on here because we just feel like we connect already.
Yeah, totally. I know what you mean. Like I feel like there's not many vegan, there's always a lot of anger, isn't there, in vegan circles, because we do this for like unpleasant reasons when you get down to it. Like, I think what the Chickpeeps is and what you guys do, the Vegan View, is it's like optimism. Like, you're optimistic about human nature and that other people want to be vegan if they just are shown the way how, if they're just like given a bit of help. So yeah, I would say that's probably the thing that unites us.
And you guys have so many incredible interviews and they're so thought-provoking, and you guys really ask questions I don't hear everyone else ask, and I feel like there's such a fresh perspective with every guest you have on. We were just talking before this, the Colleen Patrick Rideau interview was just so good, and it's everything that we talk about on here. And anyone watching this, definitely go download. If you're doing some podcast listening, the Chickpeeps will make your day brighter and you'll learn so much.
Thank you. That really means a lot.
We'd love to kind of start at the beginning and hear a little bit about your vegan journey for those of our viewers who aren't familiar.
Well, I was very lucky to be brought up vegetarian from birth. Had a few moments where I was force-fed fish and things like that at school, and a little moment where I thought I'd try a few things when I was maybe in my early 20s. But I've been vegan now for about, I think, 4.5 years. And I was already pretty much vegan anyway, but more for the health reasons, because giving up things like dairy made my skin better, got rid of my asthma, but there were still moments where I'd have a bit of halloumi. That was my last thing to go. Yeah. And it was a strange thing. It just hadn't gone to my heart yet. It was just there in my head. I wasn't quite ready for that leap. And then the time I actually went vegan was when I was on a plane to Las Vegas randomly. And my friend that I was sitting next to on the flight, she was trying out veganism for 30 days. And she wouldn't, can you see Puff, by the way?
Sorry, Puff is totally upstairs from you right now. Sorry, I'm trying to keep her down. Let Momo have her moment.
She wants to be involved in the girl talk, because usually we've got two boys in the podcast, so it's nice.
Love it.
Feminine energy. But yeah, I was like, why aren't you eating the butter? Because I would have the bread and butter and that would be my normal thing. And she said, well, I don't know how the cow was treated. I don't know where it came from. And I always say this, but I had this moment of just like a weird flashback or some kind of film with all these images of like, where was that cow? How was that cow treated? How did they feel? Did it come from multiple cows, this little thing of butter? Yeah. And then it went straight to my heart like a dagger, and I was like, I'm not having any of this ever again. So it was quite a dramatic and quick moment.
Yeah, I love the distinction between it being in your head and your heart. I experienced something similar where it was so, especially since it's such a new concept and a different way of living, so much of it is logistics and like what can you eat and what can you not eat, and then it's the practice of that, and then how do I actually implement this, and then once that is sort of, once that's sunk in, then it really does sort of migrate to your heart a lot of the time. So I can relate to that. I love the way you put that.
That's when it stays as well for most
people.
Yeah. I feel like that's the case for a lot of people. Like, I feel like most people are vegan in their mind and they just haven't made that connection to their heart yet, because almost everyone I know loves animals, and you can see that by their cats and their dogs. They love their cats and their dogs. And so it's just about making that connection. It's like, I think they know they don't want to treat animals poorly, and if they saw it, they wouldn't want to, but they're not there yet.
Everyone's on their
Everyone has a lot of conditioning to undo, though, don't they? And we talk about this a lot on the podcast, that it's so much a part of people's identity that for them to go vegan, they need to like investigate that and find a new identity that isn't, especially for people who work, like, you know, farmers, people who work in agriculture. It's like, it's such a sense of their family, and family, we all know that connection that's so important to everyone. So you can't just like get frustrated or demand people to go vegan at once, because there's a lot to unpack. Yeah.
Humans are so complicated, and I feel like we all are like, oh, I went vegan overnight, but did you really? Was vegetarianism like you never heard of it, and then one day you're told and you're like, okay, I'm vegan? But no, it's like little seeds are planted, little things you start to question and like conceptualize, and especially questioning your upbringing is such a big critical thinking skill that it takes time to undo like all this programming.
That's so true.
Momo, when you went vegan, how did your family and friends react?
Well, I already had a few friends who were vegan, which was great, and they were setting a really nice, kind example. So I didn't really see many of that militant kinds of vegans before. They were very much posting their food, and it all looked so appealing, and they looked so healthy and glowing. Apart from my one auntie that I had who was vegan since I was born, just had a different perception, also because of what family members would have said about it. But my mum's pescatarian, my brother's a chef. They understood it. They'd sometimes be like, "You're just being too extreme now." When I'd be like, "I'm not having that cheese, I'm not going to buy you milk." So they couldn't really understand that. But since then, they have been really successful. And I do think one day my brother will go vegan. And my friends have just been supportive. Most of my friends now are vegan. And if they aren't, they're having more plant-based milk now. And they're really happy to show that off. They're like, "Oh, I had a vegan donut the other day." So it's a nice thing. You can see that even if it's a slow process for them, they are somewhere on that path if it's going to be right for them. But I never pressure them. I just don't see the point. And that comes back to all of us having this attractivist kind of style, which I think works a lot better personally for my personality type than any other kind.
Yeah, definitely. I know you're so kind and so open on your stories and on your Instagram. The power of you being kind and understanding, accepting, and not shaming others is so great that just your presence in people's lives who've never encountered a vegan quite like that, or a vegan at all, is so profound.
We'd love to hear your vegan story too, and how you came to veganism.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've told this story so many times, and I was like, how do I? Sometimes I tell it for like 15 minutes, and sometimes it could be. I'll try and shorten it. So, I mean, I was always really sensitive to animals because I grew up in the countryside, and we always just had animals just all around us. I mean, even the other day, I texted Momo and the other Chickpeeps. I was like, "Look, a family of sheep just visited." Literally, a family of sheep came into the household and were like chewing on their bushes. And so we all always like loved animals and respected them. My family, my parents really have this kind of reverence for nature. But then they didn't have the connection between that and vegetarianism. I think because they grew up around farmers, and they see certain animals as farm animals and certain animals as pets, and just that they had those things. So but then I don't know, I just always had this sense of like meat is weird and disgusting. And as soon as when I was about 10 or 11, as soon as I like could start questioning those things, and my parents they were always honest, and as soon as I realized you could be a vegetarian, I did that. So I was vegetarian since a young age, and I always would say I'm vegetarian for the animals, because it was always ethical reasons, and I just didn't like violence. I didn't want to think that anyone shed any blood for any food. But then I didn't go vegan for a long time, not till I was like 20 or 21, because I thought that was too extreme. I thought it was really radical. And I talked about this a lot on the podcast, of course, but I had a really weird relationship with food. I had an eating disorder, and anytime I entertained the idea of veganism, my mom would be like, "No, that's too extreme." And she saw it as like an excuse for an eating disorder, so she really discouraged me from it. And I also was quite a like bad vegetarian, not in that I ate any animal products, but I didn't really eat vegetables, and I didn't like them. So I was like, yeah, if I go vegan, I will die. So I didn't. It took a while. But then so it was when I lived in LA, and I discovered so many vegan restaurants. There's such a huge community there. So many people who made it look normal and easy, and that the food was delicious. And then I read the book, I suppose, because I was like, I would post about like animal rights campaigns and about vegetarianism, and people would be supportive, but then people would also be like, "Well, then why are you not vegan?" And it was always a little thing that was there, like, "Yeah, why am I not? Why am I not? Oh, I can't be. I'm just gonna." And then eventually, it was kind of similar to Momo in that nobody really forced me. I just saw this book on Amazon. The title was Eating Animals, and I was like, "Oh," I just felt really drawn to it. And I was like, "I need to read that. I need to at least know." And I read that book, and it was so distressing. I was so upset the whole way through. I was crying so much. And this is just reading those accounts, this is not even, I was like, I can't even read these things. Imagine watching them, imagine being in that position. So after I read that book, I was like, I'm obviously vegan in my heart. I just haven't put it into practice. So I would say that was like where it started, but it took me a couple years to fully like transition, and I was very cautious, because I was like, I don't want to bring back any kind of triggering eating disorder habits of like restriction or all that. So I did it very slowly, but yeah, that's my story.
I know it's really prevalent in the vegan community that a lot of people who are recovering from eating disorders had struggle trying to find that balance between like, am I doing this because it's the ethical thing, it's because that's something that is really strong in my heart, something I'm passionate about, a cause, or is it really masking like restriction and obsession with food? So we always encourage people, do it at your own pace, really have a good relationship with yourself. So how you talked about that.
And prioritize your health, because you're not going to be a good vegan or a good activist if it's messing with your health, your mental health and everything. So yeah, I'm the same. I always think people who are recovering with that or dealing with that, don't be shamed by other vegans into doing it too quickly, because it's your body and it's your journey. And like a lot of things, I was thinking about this the other day about, people talk about their vegan anniversary, and that's a big thing for a lot of people. I don't have one of those because I didn't do it overnight. And sometimes I see those posts and I feel a bit jealous, or I feel a bit like, oh, that I'm a bad vegan. I didn't have a big day where I cut everything out. But I also think I avoided a lot of badness by not doing that, because so much of, like, say for example, saying, oh, it's been a month since I've had a piece of cheese. That to me would be too reminiscent of, it's been a month since I've had a carb. It's been a week since I've had food, just shit like that. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I was like, yeah, okay. Just, I think people with eating disorders have to be really careful of that, because it can feel very similar, and you have to just like protect yourself from that, and yeah, do it in a way that's right for you, work with a therapist, and don't push yourself too far. Yeah.
It's about shedding all of the normal pressures around veganism, I think, if you're in that position, just your own rules then apply.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. I think that's great advice. I always say that if you're sick, if you have an eating disorder currently, that you actually probably shouldn't go vegan. You should focus on your recovery, and then when you're ready, you can figure out, why you're really doing it, and when you're healthy enough to figure out when you're triggered, because the triggers are always there. It's just you're better able to manage them. So
yeah. That's so true. You're more aware. But I think also we can't forget, like, there is a real element to going vegan. Like, it really healed my relationship with food. And I think you're so right in that if you're in the thick of it, like, avoid anything that feels like a diet, or that I can't have that food. But, like for me, when I found veganism, it was about 10 years after my eating disorder, and I still had a weirdness around food, but by suddenly switching to something that was like value based, and it wasn't, the food turned into something about me that I cared about, and it wasn't about like calories, measurements, aesthetics. It was, and that it like accidentally healed my relationship with food. Like, I never set out for that to happen, but switching the focus and caring about something else that involved my diet but wasn't about a diet, it completely changes. So I think I would say, along with that advice of don't rush it, I would also say, like, it can be really amazing. Like, I think my mom would probably be able to speak on this better, that you think of it like, oh, it could be a crazy diet, but it can also be a real gift in that it relieves you of a lot of, I don't know, weirdness. It did for me anyways.
No, I totally I've said the same thing with my eating disorder. I came to it much later on. So I was sort of used to life post eating disorder. I've been like 16 years, but like you said, I still had weirdness around food, and I still assigned morality to certain food. And so much of it was like what I'm eating and like how it's affecting me. And when I went vegan, and like Momo, when you said it went from my head to my heart, I realized that it wasn't about me. And I think that shift is what really made it something that it didn't affect my eating disorder. If anything, it really helped me trust my hunger, trust my body. And I just felt like there was like a very deep sense of peace, knowing that there was alignment between my values and what I was putting into practice every day. And that was very, I think, healing as well. I felt very empowered by that.
Yeah.
I think on a spiritual level, so many people feel that once they start to align these two things, it's like, you can even imagine the world that opens up to you. It's not even there before. The concept of it doesn't exist, is it?
Yeah.
Suddenly you feel so different just from that alone. Yeah. And that's one of the most beautiful things about veganism, I think, as well.
I agree. Yeah. Love that.
It becomes like, I know for me, food was just food, and I just loved food. But now every time just having vegan things and having a vegan meal, there's so much like love and compassion every time I look at it. And every time I post it, I'm like, this is something from my heart, and this is standing up against something I completely disagree with and hate on a very deep spiritual level. And it feels so good. It's kind of magical when your actions line up with what you feel and you believe.
Yeah. When I was younger, I always loved animals, but then I would eat them. And I remember it was like sometimes when I would order a burger and someone would moo or talk about it being a cow, then I felt like I couldn't eat it anymore after hearing that, but it still never really completely clicked for me. But it's so crazy to think that there might have always been that little underlying feeling when I was eating animal products of maybe this isn't right. And now, you know, you sit down 3 times a day or however many times a day to eat, and there's no animal products on your plate. And it's just so freeing. Like I feel no guilt associated with it. I feel just light and happy. I think it's one of those things you don't realize happens, but does.
Yeah, and if you think of the vibrations of food as well, sorry, Evie, just like dead food is a dead vibration, live vegetables and all of this is a more of a live vibration. So it makes total sense you'd feel that way.
Yeah.
Totally. I know a lot of people say that they feel less angry when they go vegan, but then I think there's people that feel more angry sometimes when they go vegan, especially like right after they go vegan, then they feel like they have to immediately like tell everybody in their life what they know and change everybody's minds. And I feel like that's something that we preach against, and you guys also feel like isn't the best approach. So I'd love to talk more about that and what you guys think about it.
Yeah. Well, I think we are on the podcast, like, yeah, we're trying to promote positivity and the attractivist approach. But I think we've talked about this a lot the past season 2. It's so important to feel those feelings. It's okay to be angry, but it's what you do with it. Like, you have to channel it into the right way, like, because it's, you know, we all feel that feeling of angry that animals are being killed, like literally all the time, and that people are feeling this entitlement to eat their bodies and profit off them and exploit them. But it's not going to be helpful to you, for you, your relationships, or the animals, if you're going to take that anger and then just like shame people or just tell them off or make them feel bad. Like, they shut down to your message. It kind of isolates you from them. Yeah, they're not listening to the message. So we're always like it's important to feel it, because otherwise why would you be motivated to be vegan? Because it is counterculture. There are going to be, you know, the society isn't made for vegans, and there are so many people trying to talk you out of it. So it's really important to have your emotions plugged into it. But I do think then have a safe space to vent, like, you know, we do on the Chickpeeps WhatsApp. Sometimes, like, that's a lot less nicey than the podcast, because we
have
angry.
our Facebook page for that, and we're like, vent here.
Yeah.
And we will support you.
Yeah. But I just don't think it's going to be productive to put that on a podcast or to put that on my social media pages. So it's like, use the anger, feel the anger, and then kind of tune into, to use a Harry Potter phrase, tune into your Ravenclaw. Like, because I feel like a Gryffindor would just react like boom, boom, you know, like angry express. Ravenclaw would think about it, process it, would be like, what is the most effective and smart way to deliver this information? Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you guys have seen this meme. I'm sure I've seen it on one of your pages. It's the Pingu, the angry Pingu, and he's like pasting this heart and glitter on this card in front of him. And what does it say? It's something like, when you tried telling everyone the truth about the meat industry, but now no one listens, and now you have to make recipes or something. Have you seen it? It's so funny. He's like, and that's how I felt at the start. I was like, this is not fair. Like, why is no one listening to me? Do you guys realize what you're doing? And it didn't feel in alignment with me to be like that at all. But I was so mad, like you were saying, that angry outburst. And then when I just realized that wasn't happening, I was like, oh, I'm just going to have to do food stuff then, I guess. I'm going to post some food then. And then maybe someone will join my little Facebook group that I've made for new vegans. And because that proved to be the most effective way, I just carried on along. I mean, I don't do a lot of food stuff, but the kind approach, it's genuine and real. I'm not just doing that because, like, I think it works. But on our podcast, like, if people haven't heard it before, we have 2 guys on it as well, and they have slightly different approaches to Evie and I. It's not that they're like crazy angry all the time, but one of them's really into the more rebellious, anarchist kind of activism, isn't he, Tyler? Yeah. And Robbie's more like factual, but he's quite direct. Whereas if there's ever some drama that might kick off on the Instagram comments, we'll kind of let them use Robbie like this and back away from it. But it's definitely, I don't know, I feel like compassion, especially when we're always coming back to spiritual level, kindness. I don't think shame works on me, so I never try and put that on anyone else. I try not to speak into a narrative that someone else is wrong, and it's more about education, like you said, about planting seeds, and kind of from a perspective of, this feels great and we're doing good, and knowing that even if we get any anger or opposition ever, we're always going to know we're on the right side of history and that we were doing the right thing. And this is what we say to people if they're getting hate from family or friends or anyone, you know that you're doing the right thing. There's no real argument against it when you are talking about the ethics. Maybe the environment, some people could say, oh, but what about this? The health, oh, what about this? Ethics, no argument at all.
Something I was thinking about anger recently, I kind of have a theory of like, because what you said, Mama, like, it doesn't work with me. Anger and shame sometimes think, is it is it for the feminine energy it doesn't work? Because I feel like a lot of like women, a lot of us are kind of, we grow up with this extremely critical voice in our head. We're kind of, the patriarchal society like trains us to be mean to ourselves, and so someone else having like with a vegan message being mean and being like, you're wrong, you're bad, it's almost like we're so mean to ourselves that doesn't work, that makes us shut down. And so for me, it was always like people like Victoria Moran or Colleen Patrick Goudreau, that really loving, kind, warm, like inviting me into veganism. That was the thing. But like, I don't think that it's to say that being angry and using shame is wrong. Like, say we had Joey Carbstrong on the podcast, and that approach, clearly it works for him. He changes a lot of people vegan, and that's the thing that turned him vegan, and he's very angry. And you know, I watch it and I'm like, oh, you know, like I feel a bit unsettled by it. But it's also like, he's very powerful. There's no denying he turns a lot of people vegan. So I think it's about like your energies, and obviously we all resonate with something different to the angry vegan archetype, but I don't know, I feel like there's definitely a place for all.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely a place for everybody. And for me, the thing that makes like a huge distinction is that we're not doing something to make people like feel obliged or feel like they're bad, but to challenge. That's very different. Like Mike the vegan we've had on, and he isn't like us as like rainbows and sunshine, this is so great. He's more, here are the facts, like let's have a provoking conversation, but I'm not going to attack you. People like Earthling Ed and people who challenge the norm and the social conditioned thoughts of eating animals is normal and good in a way that's not making people feel obliged to change, like the shame and the hurt. And I think I love what you said about, as like if you have feminine energy, you kind of are trained to be mean to yourself. Like the patriarchy puts all these like mean voices in your head. And like, I do see, I think that's such a good point, that people with that aren't already receptive to another mean voice, because that's how I feel. I'm like, I can't have like one more person yelling at me because I'm already doing that, honey. Like,
yeah. And I think there's a difference between challenging and just bullying somebody into believing what you believe, or the shame aspect of it, I think is like what makes it totally different. And I do think like people respond differently to different things, but I honestly wonder from a personal standpoint if the people who use this approach, if how they feel afterwards, because what I've noticed is because when I first went vegan, I was so angry. I was like, you know, crying to my mom, like, how can you eat cheese, and like all of these things. And it just was a really, really bad approach. I learned very early on from the feedback from my family and friends, like it was not sitting well with them. And then I felt bad too, because I felt like I blew up at this person and we didn't accomplish anything. If anything, it's caused a rift between us. And now I have to sit with that, and it's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. Whereas when I just approach things from like trying to be a shining light of a good example, I feel better. Yeah, doing that.
There's I don't know if you heard our interview with Dr. Melanie Joy, but she talks about that exact thing. She calls it secondary traumatic stress disorder, and she talks about like how like you can take on the trauma from these animals that you because you're an empathetic person, you're feeling so much. And I think we do have to be careful as activists not to carry that trauma forward and like ruin our own lives and kind of create a dark space. I think like for some people who've had a lot of trauma, like say for example undercover investigators, I don't think maybe I don't want to speak for everyone here, but I couldn't do that kind of work, and I feel like that's not because I don't have all this trauma and it would mess with me. But I think some of those undercover investigators have like had tough lives. They have this hardness to them that it's almost good for them to work out this way and they can deal with it. But for a lot of people, I think what you're describing exactly and what Dr. Melanie Joy talked about, we do have to protect ourselves from just taking something horrible and expanding it and passing that around. Like protect your energy a bit. Yeah,
I think there's a difference between someone who's like very passionate, like NISHA said, who's you know, challenging the norm, versus someone who's just straight up bullying, like you said. And I think the bullying side of it, that's just got to stop, because I just don't see that as being beneficial to the movement. And again, like you have to think back to why you're doing it and who you're doing it for. And if you're really trying to help the animals, if that's really the intention, then you should be wanting to make sure that your message is coming across as effectively as possible, because you're going to save more animals that way. But in terms of activists who are a little bit more like in your face, a little bit more passionate, I find that someone, even though that's not the approach that turned me vegan, now that I'm vegan, I do actually find that sometimes it's helpful for me to watch that content even now, because it almost is like going to a pep rally or something, like, because so much of it is like stuff I agree with, and they're wording it in a way that I don't think of. And it's so easy, you know, as a vegan to just kind of live your life and stay in your lane. And then I do think that sometimes when I watch, you know, that kind of content and I hear those interviews, it kind of does re-inspire me to just still do the way I do it, but it just feels a little fresher and more front of mind. So I think there is value to it.
Definitely.
I used to sometimes people like Joey and Ed's definitely more on the softer side, but when I was feeling angry, I'd watch them because they're so vocal and they're being powerful, and I'm like, yeah, go on, yeah, I can't do this, but you go for it, you make me feel good. So
Ed is incredibly articulate.
Yeah, so articulate.
Yeah.
I think he's a Ravenclaw, so it's got to be. Do you know what your Hogwarts houses are?
You guys, I took the Pottermore quiz and I got Gryffindor. But then I've also taken the BuzzFeed quiz and I've gotten like the Gryffindor Ravenclaw, like, you know how it ranks you?
Yeah.
I would definitely say, I think Nikki might be a Ravenclaw, and I think Hannah is either a Gryffindor or a Hufflepuff. I've thought about it very in depth, as you can tell.
I think I took the quiz once and I was Gryffindor, so that makes sense.
I only ask because you know how you were saying how there's a different type of activism for every personality. It's kind of, I mean, I'm not that well versed in Harry Potter, but due to the podcast, I've kind of become more and more accustomed to it. It's such a topic all the time. But yeah, for each house and for each kind of, I guess you can think of it as an archetype, there will be so many different types of activism. Like, for example, a Hufflepuff can take all these different roles that are maybe more on a low-key kind of level, maybe in the trenches with people, holding people's hands the way through. Gryffindors are more like the mouthpieces. Slytherins might be more, I don't know, strategic?
Yeah.
Would strategic be the word? I'm trying to think of Tyler, maybe setting up charities and things. And Ravenclaw's the ones with all the facts. And I just think it's such a nice example, thinking of it just in that little Harry Potter context, of how everyone and every type of activism is needed and welcome and brilliant. And I think some people think that they should be doing the save campaigns where you actually go to the slaughterhouse, the vigils. And, you know, I just think if your type of activism is to encourage your friends, then that's your type of activism. And I think shame can come in within the activist community there as well. Like, why aren't you doing this? You should be doing that. That doesn't make you the best activist you could be. So it comes in, and yeah, I feel like wherever we can apply more kindness on every level, on the outer and inside the community, is always going to be a good thing. And it seems like what everyone here is very much for anyway.
I love that you mentioned how many different approaches and different personalities and things there need to be, because one thing that we always talk about is like, you shouldn't take on vegan as an identity. It's so important to stay who you are and like all the things that make you special and still be vegan. And that's one of the reasons we started the show, is because we didn't see any other vegans that were like us on YouTube that were talking about the same things that we talk about. That I feel like we all stayed really true to who we were before being vegan and found a way to veganize who we were. Yeah. And I think sometimes people get kind of overwhelmed with the idea that being vegan means being a certain type of person.
So true.
Yeah,
what do
you devote your life to activism. Yeah, it's hard sometimes. I feel a bit guilty sometimes when even around Tyler, our co-host, because he's the only one who works in, and well, he works in an animal welfare organization, like a shelter, full time. He worked in PETA before, and sometimes like talking to him, like I interviewed him, we did like a bonus episode, I interviewed him about working for PETA, and I was just like, don't you ever feel like you want to do something else with your life? Like, why do you have to be devoted to this? And it's quite hard to always, every minute of your career, be thinking about animal abuse. And he was just like, the animals have it so much harder. And I was like, oh, well,
yeah.
You know, like, it's hard sometimes when you think, I don't know the answer to this, because sometimes I really do feel like, why do I get to do something that gives me so much joy? You know, like acting and being in the arts is such a joyful, fun thing. And I kind of was like, animal activism is rewarding and fulfilling, but that can't be, I don't know, it's hard to deal with that guilt. But I think everyone has to, like, we all have different talents for sure, and you know, you have to play to your strengths as well. And I don't know, hopefully the universe will prod you in the right direction a little bit.
No,
well,
definitely.
I think it goes to what you were saying, like you have to take care of yourself in order to be a good activist. And if taking care of yourself means doing things that make you happy, that aren't like directly connected to veganism, then that's part of making sure that you can be a good activist.
Yeah. Or so like, do you guys think it's fine to also not be an activist as a vegan? Because it's so, most of my friends who are vegans are also activists to some way. There's very few people who are just like, well, Elliot actually, who we have on the podcast a bunch, he's not really an activist. He's just kind of like, I post about vegan food sometimes, you know, but like, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, both of my parents are vegan, and they're, I mean, maybe my dad is a little more of an activist, but my mom's definitely not someone who's actively like trying to convert people or trying to spread facts. She really does just live her life and sometimes post some vegan food. And they have made so many people their age go vegan or completely change their diet by doing literally nothing.
Wow.
And it's just like Momo was talking about, just someone being there and just you being around your friends and being around your peer group, like being around your demographic is going to instill change whether you like it or not. For me, I remember when I first went vegan, seeing all these activists who like, that was their whole identity. All these YouTubes, like vegan was their whole identity. And that's like all they talked about on their channel. Was very alienating. It made me feel like, oh, like I went vegan without like being exposed to all of this. And then when I saw that, I was like, all of a sudden I felt a lot of feelings of not enough, or like, who am I to be a vegan as well as all these other things that make up NISHA? And it's like, right
or that you're in a cult.
Yes, it feels like a cult. It feels like you're going to get excommunicated if you do something wrong. It feels like your rights and privileges will be stripped if you're not perfect. But I mean, now we have so many like different people going vegan, and so many different vegan publications like celebrating differences in veganism, and it makes me feel comfortable, and it makes space for more people to be a part of the vegan community.
And you're right, just like normalizing it, that it should, you know, like people who eat meat, they don't have to make it their whole thing. They don't have to be the vegan whatever on all their social medias. Like, you know, even like people always ask me about food because of veganism. I'm just like, I'm not that much of a foodie. Like, that's not my main interest. I eat it because I have to and survive and it tastes good. But like food and what we eat isn't us. Like, but I think, yeah, like what you're saying and what you're doing of just being yourself, keeping who you were before and being vegan, it's like that can be enough. That's all you need to do, really.
My fiance is vegan as well. He went vegan at the same time as me, and he's not a social media person. He, like, you would never know that he was vegan unless you went out to eat with him and noticed that he ate vegan food. But he doesn't talk about it, like, and same thing with Nisha's parents. It's so weird how many, like his whole office tried to go vegan for a month because they were just interested in what he was doing. And he's never said, you guys should try this or like do this. And I'm like, why? It's so frustrating.
How
I'm like,
are you doing that?
yeah. I'm like, I like went and told all my friends immediately after I went vegan and like begged them to go vegan with me, and like have not had a single friend in real life go vegan because of me. And yet he doesn't do anything. And his whole office is like trying to go vegan. So I really think it's
powerful for that, isn't there? Not talking about it, since the stereotype is always like, oh God, I'm going to get an onslaught of information now. I really like that.
I think some people are intrigued by it. Like, I really think it is a form of activism, whether intentional or not.
Yeah,
it is
funny. I had a similar thing with my brother where he went vegetarian, not fully vegan, but he's 100% vegetarian and he hasn't gone back. And I remember being like, when he told me, I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. But he's like the youngest one in the family. But I was also a bit annoyed because I was like, he's the only one I didn't target. He's the only one, literally, because I was like, he's too young. He doesn't know how to cook. He's just a silly young boy. You know, not silly, but I was like, oh, you know, when you're young, you're only thinking about yourself. And yeah, it was a bit like, well, shit, what did I do wrong? How did I miss that? Like, I don't know. I don't think you can make anyone vegan. I think
no. Yeah. I think people just have different levels of seeds that have been planted throughout their life, and you just gotta let them grow. People generally like don't want to kill a living sentient being, and I just feel like it's just our society is telling us like all these things, and we just have the weight of that, and we start to pull back the layers slowly. Everyone's at like different levels, and you can't just like expect people to catch up to your level.
Yeah, and I think also the idea that you have to be an activist when you go vegan is probably actually stopping people from going fully vegan, because people, like, you just think about the average person, they have work, they have family, they have all of these obligations in their life and all these responsibilities, and the one thing that is sort of on autopilot is the way you eat, because you've been doing it your whole life. And then to drastically change that, and some people don't realize that you don't have to do it overnight. So there's the thought that they might have to do it overnight, perfectly follow all these rules, and then have all this information stored up so that they can then explain it to other people and be an activist. Like, that's a complete shift of, like what you said, Hannah, identity, lifestyle, you know, and that just, I think, creates such a barrier to entry that just makes veganism look very unattractive and undoable.
Yeah, I think it's isolating in a way as well, just on an emotional level, when you don't have anybody in your life that is vegan. Oh, baby.
Oh, it's so
Oh my God.
I forgot what we were talking about.
I was saying, like, how it's already isolating on an emotional level. And then I think of people all the time who, we're so lucky to live in big cities where there are lots of vegans, lots of open-minded people as well, but in some smaller towns where people they have their friends that they've known their whole lives, and like that's their circle, and they don't really maybe have the opportunity to meet new people in person. I think it's important to like understand that aspect of it too. Like, they might be afraid of losing their friends if they start talking about being vegan and things like that. So
Community is hugely important, for sure. The right community for you.
Yeah.
community and support. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is kind of a weird shift in the conversation, but I love London so much. I usually go around this time for the last couple of years. In springtime, I've been with my mom, and there's so much good vegan food in London. So I would love if you guys could tell me some of your favorite spots. I know
Yes.
some
Oh my
donuts.
Good idea.
God, where to begin?
I know there's so much.
For when we can come visit.
We'll take you around.
Yeah,
I really love Earthling Ed's place, Unity Diner.
Never
It's like a
been.
fast food kind of place, but all the money goes to Surge, his charity, and they're going to have, well, I don't know what's happened with it right now, but he's got a sanctuary in the works. So all of the money goes to that. So you just feel so good about eating that food, knowing that all of that money is going to go towards it.
Yeah.
And you love Wild Food Cafe, don't you? It's not your favourite place, though, is it?
Oh my God, yeah, I was thinking that Wild Foods. I was thinking that place. So
Isn't
Wild Foods, it's in, have you been to it?
The Neil's
Yeah, Neil's Yard. So it's like
Okay.
really bright and colorful, and it's got like, to be honest, it's all raw, so I don't love the mains. I find it like, oh, it's a bit too exactly what you think of vegan food. But the cakes are out of this world, and they're like all colorful, like rainbow cakes and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And it's like, you're right, it's a very colorful, kind of cozy place to
Yeah, and they're all really mindful of like seasonal produce. Yeah, and
yeah.
they're great. They're very
Oh,
community.
Pharmacy is
Yes.
amazing. Have you been? Oh, in Notting Hill.
It is
Everything's biodynamically grown with the moon, and it's gorgeous.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's really beautifully
I really
sourced.
love Deliciously Ella's Cafe. We went like 3 times in a week.
Yeah, it's very sweet.
I think that's where me and Momo met, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was actually. Yeah,
First time we
yeah.
met.
All right, guys, thank you so much for having this conversation with us. This has been so fun. Glad you guys are our first international guests.
Such a
Yeah,
pleasure,
so much to
honestly.
hang out. Yeah. Come to London.
Yes.
Oh, we want to. Vegan View overseas is like our goal.
Oh yeah.
Thank you guys so much for being here. We'll make sure to put their podcast, The Chickpeeps, in the description box, as well as their social media handles. That's where you can find our Facebook group and a link to subscribe as well. And we will see you guys in a video next week. Bye.
Bye.